Hi, this is Anna Brecka from Recruiting Blogs. Today we welcome you to the Recruiting Blogs webinar on the evolution of staffing technology, sponsored by our friends at TalentWise.
Today's presenters are Matt Cherney, Executive Editor of Recruiting Blogs, and he tweets at Recruiting Blogs and at Matt Cherney. And he's joined by Karen Wiedeski. She's the Director of Marketing at TalentWise, and please reach her at TalentWise or at Wiedeski. With that, I will hand the mic over to Matt.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm really excited about this particular webinar and the chance to really talk about something that in HR technology I think gets a little bit overlooked, and that's the staffing segment. Having started my career out in third-party recruiting, I understand kind of what some of those challenges are that face a third-party recruiter versus an enterprise that's able to spend big bucks on big systems and configure it and customize it. And knowing that you have to do that for every client, I think, is a huge challenge, but also a huge opportunity. So very excited to walk you through where staffing technology has been and where it's going. And I'd also like to introduce Karen Wiedeski, who's the Director of Marketing for TalentWise. Karen, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Matt. I'm really happy to be here.
Great. So I guess with that, we'll get into the webinar itself. And here's what we're going to talk about today, a brief history of staffing technology. We're going to look at how it's moved, which frankly hasn't been a lot until recently, from the Stone Age to spreadsheets. So, we've gone from tablets to Excel. But we're also going to look at kind of how the market's evolved recently with the rise of SaaS, software as a service, cloud computing, big data. You choose the buzzword. They all have implications for third-party recruiting and staffing. And finally, the most important thing is the business case, and that's the bottom line. Obviously, we're in the business as third-party recruiters where we really need to get ROI from all the spend we make because we're in an extremely tight and competitive talent market. So we'll be looking at how you can adjudicate and measure the success of any staffing software and really put that to use, both filling requisitions efficiently and effectively, as well as cutting down on days to fill and getting candidates onboarded quicker so you can get placements quicker and obviously then get your 90 days in quicker as well. So without further ado, let's start off where every good story starts with a brief history of staffing technology. Really, we haven't changed all that much in the beginning. You can see, obviously, contingent workforce management was a little bit easier when there was no actual recruiting to be done. You could impress or Shanghai your talent pool. Had master service agreements from the beginning of time. Obviously, those got violated then as well. And as you can see in the Book of Exodus, Book of Mark, it consistently mentions managing talent throughout the Bible, which is something that's interesting. So this is actually something that people have been struggling with since the early Egyptian dynastic period and so on. The really only difference in the last few hundred years, I would say, is going to be that we have gone from chiseling our records onto cuneiform tablets to doing it on Excel, but it still takes about the same amount of time for most of us. So again, Old Testament, same challenges. Obviously, have worker mobility, workforce and benefits planning. We always talk about hire to retire. Unfortunately, obviously, with the Egyptians, that meant actually burying their employees with their boss, which is something that I'm glad we've evolved away from. Romans, obviously, very much the same thing. Benefits administration, a few perks there from Spartacus. You're familiar with that. Performance incentives, thumb up, thumb down, is a pretty powerful indicator of how you're doing, but at the same time, survival of the fittest in this business is no longer a literal thing, thank goodness. Obviously, moved into the Bible again, referral fees, outplacement services, and then we move into cultural fit. 90-day guarantee from Roots. I'd also say that Kunta Kinte versus Toby might be one of the first examples I can think of the distinction between employer brand and personal brand. But what really hasn't changed, even in the antebellum time period, one of the first classified ads that we saw in the United States actually came from the Word Test for American in 1794. and they were looking for a 4.5-foot tall colored boy for office work. So basically the whole point of that is, A, why do they have to be 4.5 feet tall? And what sort of office work are they going to be doing would be the more valuable thing to focus on, one would think. But long story short, requirements have always been extremely tight and extremely difficult to fill. Then the paradigm of how we got and managed talent changed a little bit with literally a war for talent. Then something happened after that when our employees got free will, serfdom ended. We had the Industrial Revolution, and as the 16th Amendment passed, we got income tax, which then made it a little bit more difficult for employees to manage records and compliance. That was solved relatively quickly. Within the next year after that, the mechanical time clock was invented. So you can definitely see a shift in macroeconomic patterns along with some of the compliance issues involved. It also made managing staffing a lot harder. Why? Because workers suddenly have a say. If you've ever recruited people, you know that that dynamic element of human behavior definitely makes the staffing process more interesting. So in 1865, obviously, the 13th Amendment passed. That outlawed slavery. Unions and compliance came into vogue. The Department of Labor was founded in 1913, 1935, the National Labor Relations Act, 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act. As the bumper sticker says, you can thank unions for the weekend and the 40-hour work week. And then 1959, the Labor Disclosure and Reporting Act enters effect. 1960s, we're getting the Equal Rights Amendment and other things. And then obviously in the 70s and 80s, we moved into EEOC, AA, 90s, OFCCP, and the list of acronyms just keeps growing. But long story short, not only do workers suddenly have the ability to work when they want, we're also having a competition for skilled talent. So with that, we've evolved several different theories. And this guy is named Frederick Winslow Taylor. Frederick Winslow Taylor actually was the very, very first proponent of what we call big data. And essentially what he said is that in order to maximize worker efficiency and productivity, you need to be able to break down every single task in order to adjudicate the effectiveness of what individuals are doing on the job, right? And so essentially that's more or less what we're still trying to do, only we're trying to do it with systems. But interesting enough, even in his paper, The Principles of Scientific Management in 1912, what Taylor said was, in the past, man has been first, but in the future, the system must be first. The first object of any good system must be that of developing first-class men. So systems should serve as people. Automation should also be able to enable personalization. It's a struggle that we're still dealing with today. Complicating this is what we call the human relations movement. It's a guy named Elton Mayo. And Elton Mayo ran a study called the Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect says this, that the behavior of a worker changes by the mere fact that they're being observed. And the more changes that you can give to an employee, and the more observation and feedback that you can give to them, the more productive, satisfied, and engaged they are. Why does that matter to staffing? Because it means that people are hardwired for a change. And if you can build, develop, and sustain a relationship with somebody and know that you have a vested interest in their career, when you have a job or opportunity that comes up for them, they're not only going to be hardwired for a change, but the fact that you've observed them means that you'll suddenly be trusted in order to be an arbiter of that change. So a couple of important notes. All right, so was all that really necessary? I just did the staffing version of We Didn't Start the Fire, but here's the thing. We haven't progressed a whole lot from the cuneiform tablet days. As I mentioned earlier, we really have continued to use manual processes to kind of just-in-time recruiting, and we try to reinvent the wheel consistently in order to make sure that our clients are happy while not necessarily satisfying our needs, creating the efficiencies that we can, or at the same time creating a positive experience for our candidates, as well as the immense net of regulatory and compliance issues that has since developed, as you can see there. If it were as easy as it was in Egyptian times, our staffing needs would look very different. So right now, we're at an interesting point in the progression of staffing, and that's what we call the rise of the machines. If you have had to deal with the agency manager feature in any system, or you've had to comply with any RFP process in order to be approved as a vendor, you already know the fact that all of the automated processes we've had, from our Rolodexes to our spreadsheets to our tracking days to fill on a whiteboard, those have kind of given way on the corporate side. And the question is, how do we manage disparate clients with disparate systems and disparate needs in a consistent way that we can continue to deliver the same value that they need without having to continually conform our processes on a client-by-client basis, which is something I think we've all struggled with. So here's where the opportunity really lies and why it's a great time to really start thinking about building out the technological capabilities to mirror, match, and work with the system of records, the applicant tracking system, the human capital management system, or any HRIS, from your staffing firm to your clients. And that's really because the world of work is changing. As we've seen, this is a huge area of opportunity because right now, the increase in contingent and temporary jobs is something that we're seeing worldwide. Right now, 1 out of 4 workers in the United States is a contingent worker. And as you can see, just from 1990 to 2000, right now, we're looking at 60% in 2000, prior to the changing economic and world realities. People are staying in the same job for 4 years. Was at 60%. Now it's 30%, and over 50% of workers since 2000 has stayed in a job for less than 2 years, which means that not only are you having a huge opportunity to create more placements, you're also having more people who are open to contingent and temporary work, as well as working with third-party staffing on managing career development, and you also have the ability to really scale up and take advantage of these trends, which are projected to continue. So again, wages and turnover, these costs are up. So we are paying our non-exempt and exempt employees more, but at the same time, as our salaries go up, so too do the costs of employee turnover, which means that beyond just a 90-day guarantee, in order to keep your clients and your candidates happy, it's really important to make sure that, as the old saying goes, recruiting doesn't stop at an offer letter, that retention and satisfaction continue, because the cost of a bad hire, as we can see here, is extremely high, up to $156,000 for your highest level placements. And if you're an executive recruiter or somebody who works on retainer, those are exactly the types of roles that are going to be the most costly for companies. So building and tracking these business cases is not only extremely important, but the trends actually tend to favor you. But from an analytics and reporting perspective, how do you get your hand around that? So let's take a look at where this opportunity is in dollars and cents, okay? This data is from the American Staffing Association, and you can just see the astronomical growth right now. It represents an $120 billion industry, 11% of which is search and placement. We often think of as traditional third-party recruiting. When it comes to temporary and contract labor or contingency workforce solutions, that's 89% of the $120 billion market. Now, what does that mean? It means that where you have a revolving door workforce who are being moved to companies for shorter term or temporary assignments, you suddenly not only have a giant requisition load, and you not only have many more candidates than you've had to deal with in the past of getting through the process, you also have a mountain of paperwork, and you have a mountain of different requirements depending on the way that the work arrangement's structured, depending on how the company is structured, and also what the record keeping for that individual jurisdiction is. So we're obviously getting into both a huge market opportunity, but a huge opportunity cost for not having the right systems in place. $120 billion is a pretty darn good piece of the pie. So with that said, just some high-level numbers. Right now, 11 million people in the U.S. alone go to work every day thanks to contingent or third-party staffing. I think that's an amazing number when you consider its implication on the workforce. And again, that 11 million is only growing. But that's 11 million different candidates that you're going to have to track, satisfy, as well as onboard and make sure that they're ramped up effectively. And hopefully, if you're in that 11% search business, stick around for those 90 days. You do have some competition, though. ASA also estimates that there are 256,000 global third-party recruiters. Of those, I would say that a lot of them probably are recruiters, in quotation marks, but competing in that market, you have 256,000 people competing with you for the exact same talent pool. And that really means that it's incumbent on you to provide the best experience, not only for your clients, but also for those candidates. Remember, we're moving from transactional to relationship. And the people who can most effectively build their relationships are going to be the ones ultimately in this new world of work who can most effectively fill requisitions and also have the highest billings. So when you break down what the cost of the market is and what the overall recruitment market is with 256,000 recruiters, every single one of those hires is worth $44,000. That's a whole lot of money. $44,000 in aggregate, right? So if you look at that statistic alone, it really, in my mind, speaks volumes about the business case behind getting a system that's going to create efficiencies, minimize liability, and allow you to onboard candidates quicker, more effectively, and continue to build and bill yourself as a value add and a trusted partner to your clients who will continually have growing workforce needs. When it comes time to fill a requisition, you're more likely to come to you and you're more likely to be able to fill that if you have the correct software and systems in place. So again, let's look at 5 years out. The market's growing 32.5%. Again, the opportunity cost is extremely high for not having technology that's going to be right. But you know what? 32.5%, $44,000 a placement. I'm no math wizard, but I would take that and retire somewhere on a Caribbean island any day of the week. So, all right, okay. Market's hot. What are you going to do about it? That's the fundamental question we're looking to answer today. So does your tech have an answer? Well, let me ask you this question. If you're still using Excel, if you're still sending your employees PDFs of paperwork from various clients, if they come in on the first day not knowing where to park, where to go get an ID, what their technical requirements and needs are, if you're still having to call and do one-on-one transactions with every single client while at the same time trying to scale your candidate outreach through things like social media and profile aggregation, you're really spending your time in the wrong place because let's face it, paperwork sucks. The good news is that we can completely eliminate paperwork today and make this as seamless as any consumer process without ever having to print off a page, while at the same time being able to track, report, and analyze every single thing we do. So again, back to the rise of machines, we have a problem with legacy systems now, and that's that they don't always talk to everything. So we have the first applicant tracking systems, as we know them, start to develop again around 2000, right when the average employee tenure started to decline, which is interesting. In order to combat that trend, obviously we had the rise of job boards, Monster famously being the first. Now I believe that there are 1.6 million job listing sites globally, so that's been an exploding market. Moving on to social and search, so really we've seen an explosion in all of these various point solutions, systems, and technologies. The problem is that as the market evolves, none of these systems actually speak to each other. And it's become so easy to communicate out and scale from solutions like LinkedIn Publisher, posting aggregated by an Indeed or a Simply Hired, that what we're finding now from competitive differentiation is a reversion back to the basics. It has become relatively easy, and I will obviously caveat that by saying this is not the case if you're in IT, healthcare, or financial services, but finding the actual qualified leads and candidates who can fill a job is really not the challenge anymore with all these technologies. The challenge is being able to get them on the phone, being able to get them to respond to an email, and being able to engage them around an opportunity and really build a relationship. So that's really what staffing professionals increasingly need to do in an era where information has become increasingly commoditized, is to be able to create that differentiation through communication. And that means really letting the technology work more on the back end than rely on it as a front end solution. So right now, this is a very hot market. $17 billion annually are spent on talent management systems. 40,000 companies worldwide compete in this space. So that's a lot of money being thrown at a lot of different vendors. Here's the problem. If you've ever heard of an integrated talent management solution, what that essentially means is that you're trying to own all parts of the process rather than create and enable a way for a single sign-on, seamlessly delivered experience for both candidates and clients. When systems don't talk to each other, that communication breakdown results in a lot of bad blood, a lot of missed opportunities, and quite frankly, a lot of blown placements. So while these there is also a significant cost for those companies or those staffing professionals who aren't able to adjust their processes to match those of their clients. And that's something we see throughout not only the efficiency perspective, but also obviously from a compliance and record keeping perspective, as well as candidate experience. Asking a candidate to create multiple sign-ons for multiple systems, multiple interfaces, some of which come down to as simple as I have to still fax back an accepted offer letter at approximately 40% of employers if I'm a candidate. All these things really begin to affect candidate experience, engagement, and what we're seeing actually is an increase of candidates who are placed who don't actually show up for the first day in the job. That's not something you want. Even worse, they show up for the first day of the job and nobody expects them because the documentation hasn't been delivered on time and they don't have the information they need in order to effectively onboard that employee, whether they're full-time, temp, or contingent labor. So as we look at the future of staffing technology, there are a lot of different vendors out there. But what you really need to focus on, I think, are, again, 4 primary areas of opportunity that any staffing software that you assess should be able to provide. And this is how they add value. The first, obviously, is efficiency. It's all about speed. If you're in staffing, I don't have to tell you that, but the candidate who's on the market is not probably only talking to you. They're talking to other firms. As you know, your clients, unless you are one of the lucky ones to have a MSP or giant exclusivity agreement, both of which, by the way, are trending down, they also are working with multiple recruiters. So efficiency is everything. Enabling efficiency is that automation component we talked about. And I'm not talking about the front-end automation. Again, I'm talking about what happens once a candidate is identified and then an offer is accepted. So as you know, half the battle is getting that offer accepted, but half the battle is also getting that candidate to start and making sure that your clients are very happy with you being able to deliver the talent that you promised at the time you promised them. Compliance, obviously, is a huge thing. Being able to keep records of systems is everything, because you as a third-party provider, this is not news to you, but essentially you are the one who is liable for any employees, not employees, any contingent or temporary workers that you're placing at a business. What we're seeing right now is both the OFCCP as well as the EEOC and some of the other regulatory bodies are really starting to step up enforcement, particularly because we now have the addition of protected classes like veterans and people with disabilities. So the amount of litigation that's stemming out of this is astronomically increasing. So being able to have not have to go to a file cabinet or being able to cover those, being able to provide the documentation that your clients need when they get audited to show that you're fully compliant, That is really important, or else you're going to be spending a lot of your time either doing document recovery, which if you've ever been audited and the manual process, I can tell you from experience is not a fun time, or you can get with the system and pull up a few keys and be able to show all your data immediately. And then finally, candidate experience. Again, there's a huge coefficient between the satisfaction of somebody with their job within the first 90 days and somebody who is either unlikely to start or will be a flight risk soon after onboarding. We're seeing an extremely high positive coefficient with how good an experience they have during the process. And that experience, again, is determined by the ease by which they're able to find an opportunity, by how streamlined the process is, which I know you're not going to necessarily have a lot of control over if it's a full-time or highly skilled kind of position. But at the same time, being able to offer them the easiest way possible to adjudicate, accept, and get the materials to the company that they need in order to start as quickly as possible, while knowing that you're not going to have to continually be asking them for different requirements or for different forms. That's really everything, because they have enough to worry about starting a new job beyond having to be the bearers of, did I get this form in? Is everything right? And as we know, traditionally, you at that point in time have likely moved on to another candidate. So there are ways, certainly, again, to automate that, as well as create a positive candidate experience by shifting the focus really from these very highly manual, highly complex processes to really being able to engage, communicate, and help a candidate succeed when they show up from the first day on the job, and really any job that you place them in. And hopefully that will be throughout their career. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Karen, who would like to speak a little bit about TalentWise. The good news is it's a really cool product, and the future of staffing technology is now. And she's going to really take home some of the points we talked about and show some real tangible business cases for the way that, that the software has actually turned into a lot of opportunity for their staffing clients. So with that, Karen.
You know, Matt, you brought up a really good point. 1 out of 40,000 companies are in this space. And that is a ton for the HR professionals, you guys, to really have to consider and deal with and navigate through. And what I would suggest, whether I was working for TalentWise or not, is find a really good partner. Find somebody who is going to not just be your vendor or say that they can provide you some services here and there if you give them a call and they're going to charge you a premium for that. Really look for someone who's going to partner with you on this journey, because it is so important for you to deliver some in-the-black numbers. The ROI in this space is so critical, and you've got to turn your team into an efficient machine and churn out those candidates and make them happy and make your customers, your clients happy in receiving that candidate. You guys all know that, and I think here at TalentWise, that's what we really focus on, is the service aspect, really the partnership between our staffing companies, our staffing customers, and then really understanding their process. So yes, we're 1 out of 40,000 companies in this space, but we are the only company who actually sits squarely between and bridges the gap between the recruiting and sourcing professional activities, including dealing with the applicant tracking systems and managing those. So we take all that data, we enrich that data, and we port it into the hiring process management solution on a single platform that we provide in the cloud to you. So now you have a single dashboard, single sign-in, single vendor's throat to choke, single vendor to ask questions of, to be invoiced from, and then it can work seamlessly with your on-premise HRIS or your payroll system, etc. The important thing for you guys to know is this isn't just about providing screening very quickly and in an accurate fashion. This is about actually determining what workflows work for you. We know the staffing industry inside and out. We know how complex your hires are because you're dealing with multiple kinds of hires, multiple levels, multiple titles, multiple pay grades, very different offer letters from Joe to Kathy and Betty to Sue. You've got to deal with all of the compliance issues for your client. And a lot of you dive into onboarding, even though a lot of times that can be handled by your client's company recruiter or hiring team. So what we really focus on is, how do you want to manage your process? How do you want to customize your forms for your client? How does the client want to have their forms presented to the candidate? What kind of forms do they need? How do you want the onboarding and provisioning to come to life? What are those steps you want to take and in what order? What kind of screening do you need to do? And what are out of the 126 tax forms available today, how do you manage them compliantly? In fact, how do you not even worry about them? So what we do is we manage from offer letters through screening, through onboarding, and provide a single dashboard for you as well as a single dashboard for the candidate. And that's really what's important to us to be able to deliver that no one else is today, but to do it in a way that's service-focused. So back to being able to partner with you on this and not just give you a solution that you turn on and pray to God that it works. We have staffing companies come to us to be able to get the service in one shot. You know, give me what I need, give it in the way that I need it, and be there to answer my questions. And that's what we deliver. It's amazing to me, these numbers that Matt conveyed, the 11 million contingent workers and the amount of growth in this $122 billion industry that you all have your finger on the pulse on is just astounding to me. And what that translates into time is 77 million days are spent a year on these contingent workers just for the onboarding process. Now, that is without an automated solution. That is without a system helping you. Now, if you were to use our system, what we've proven through our existing staffing companies is that we can reduce that to 11 million days of onboarding a year if you were to manage every single contingent worker in the United States. So from 7 days to 1 day is what we do in terms of onboarding. We also reduce the cost. We have time to hire reduced by 50% and the cost reduced by 90% from people going from the Excel spreadsheets and the paper file folders to a solution that automates their process, which is us. So we encourage you guys to ask the questions as to what your dire needs are in the hiring process and getting these candidates through the hiring system quickly and accurately. And pleasing your clients so they come back to you time and time again for all their hiring needs. That's our ultimate goal here. So Matt, what do you think about what kind of questions we're going to get?
We have a question here, Karen, through Twitter. Andy Young, he asked, if any information says how many contingent rec is delivered versus searches? And he's wondering if there's any stats out there, and he is working in pounds, so in 100 pounds. But he's wondering if Matt might have an insight on that.
So that's a very hard stat to calculate for a couple of different reasons. One, oftentimes high volume, and particularly in the contingent and temporary market, have what we call bucket requisitions, right? Which means that there might be one posting for 30 openings. Similarly, as we all know from any aggregator who is more an SEO housing play than really a owner of job posting content, there are many jobs that are posted that have been filled but will continue to show up that's on there. So what I can tell you pretty safely, though, is that all in all, we have 11 million people every day who are going to work through a form, but right now, approximately 41 million jobs in North America are filled through contingent third-party RPO every single year. So around 41 million. The average, I believe, most recent statistic I've seen is that in the United States, there are about 300 million unique job postings every year. Again, there are probably a lot of duplicates, particularly in the staffing segment, but that equates to one job posting more or less for every American. So it's a lot, but that particular statistic is very hard to get your head around for those reasons.
Matt, you mentioned 250,000 recruiters. Is that in the U.S. or globally?
That's global.
Automation. Why do you think automation is that important?
Okay, so automation is so key in this space because when you think about it, you're using paper files, the Excel spreadsheets that Matt talked about earlier. You're dealing with paper. I mean, when you just think about when you have to send an offer letter to a candidate, today for most people how it works is you're writing it up, you are sending it via email, the candidate has to receive it in an email, they have to download a PDF file, they have to print it out in order to sign it, then they have to scan it. Then they have to save it to their desktop. Then they have to attach it to an email, send it back in email to you guys at the office. And then, God forbid, they have any changes to this offer letter or any requests, then you have an entire email string going on and probably going across multiple people in your department. So what automation does is allows you to not have any of that happen. Through a single dashboard, you offer in a system that offers a portal experience, you now can communicate to that candidate directly just through the portal. So they immediately are alerted when an offer letter is available for viewing and signing from their portal experience. They click on it, they view it, they can immediately ask questions right then and there. They don't have to print it, they don't have to scan it, they don't even have to sign it with a pen. They do all of it electronically. So they can immediately sign it right then and there and hit a button that will save it and upload it to you. So in that respect, just for an offer letter, which is really, think about it this way, this is a marriage proposal, right, that you're trying to get for your client. It's no longer about dating anymore. This is the most critical factor in getting these people going. And to have this hugely manual process, even though it's a hybrid of automation and paper, it's still not automation. So being able to do this all throughout the portal, all through electronic signatures and delivery, you now have saved so much time and have also provided an accurate experience. Because God forbid that person has a question that didn't get to the right person or didn't get answered in a timely manner, and then they've got another outstanding, fabulous offer from another competing firm. So that is just one example of automation. Another example, and Matt touched on this earlier, is around onboarding and provisioning. So it is so important for somebody to be able to start their first day when they actually know where they're going. They know that they don't have to be towed because they've got a parking pass. They can get into the building. They sit at their office that actually has a chair, a desk, and they can actually start working because they've got the proper laptop and configuration. These things we take so for granted, and they are just not done. Now, granted, your customer over at the company, they are going to be able to do all that warm and fuzziness onboarding throughout that entire week and provide them proper training. But you can also do a lot of that in advance through the candidate portal. We have the social capabilities, the video capabilities. They can customize the content however they want. So what your customer needs, you can have TalentWise included in the candidate portal. And it's whether it's a training video or a health and wellness package, office configuration, or being able to provide the important information for payroll to start paying on day one, you're good to go. That's what automation does.
And I would like to add one point on that automation front. If you are trying to develop new clients, if you have that, that sort of system in place where you can say, it's a single sign-on for you, we document everything, you have access to all records from one source, and it integrates all your systems, because in almost every company, what you see is you have the applicant tracking system on the one hand, which then has oftentimes 6, 10, 12 different point solutions for different things, none of which talk to each other. And then once the candidate hits that point of hire, you then have to completely move the candidate record to a different system, which is an HRIS, that has completely different coding and logic. If you're able to say to a client very safely that, this level of automation, efficiency, and peace of mind from the documentation it is something that you, as a staffing provider, are able to offer, you have a very distinct competitive advantage over almost every other firm who is still relying on doing most of these processes manually. And for the corporate talent acquisition side, who's so suddenly geared towards HR technology, systems improvement, and things like big data reporting and analytics, that's really going to be a salient point to which to talk about for new client acquisition.
And I think one other thing I have to add about automation is kind of the opposite of automation, and that's the human element. I mean, after all, we are all human resources here, so technology is never going to replace the human touch factor. Technology is going to enable the human touch factor. So your clients and you are going to be able to spend more time with these candidates having discussions and answering their questions than pushing buttons and re-entering duplicative data.
Thank you both. We do have one more question. Could you put a little more emphasis on the candidate experience? You have both touched on it throughout the last Q&A, but again, why is it that the automation and candidate experience are that important?
Simply put, I think that the data that we looked at earlier, where we're seeing a larger and larger percentage of contingent and temporary labor, as well as certainly within global markets, third-party placement still continues to be the top source of external hire. Essentially, candidates, it's important to remember, are also consumers. And so they do, like consumers, have a choice. And so in order to be the vendor who they want to work with, the staffing provider who they want to partner with, obviously that comes down to being able to provide the easiest and most simple way to improve their quality of life and also to get them into a job as quickly and as painlessly as possible. If you've ever looked for work, you know it's work. And you know that oftentimes, you're waiting for feedback, you're waiting for forms, you're waiting for verification that everything's good to go. And you spend a whole lot of time kind of on the fence about whether or not an opportunity is going to happen. And I can tell you that almost no candidate who you're talking to is only considering your opportunity. So with that in mind, making sure that not only are you being able to provide a level of service that's outstanding for them, but also making this as easy as possible for them to not only be considered for the role, but also onboarded quickly with peace of mind, knowing that it's the right opportunity. That really is just going to tie down certainly to your ability to make placements. But more importantly, again, what we're finding is that there is an extremely high coefficient between people who have positive candidate experiences and people who are ultimately going to be customers and referrers. So when it comes to asking that question, who else do you know who might be a good fit for this role, or who do you know who you might recommend for something similar, candidates with a good experience will refer generally people within their network if they can trust, knowing that by putting their reputation as well as their network on the line to you, that you're going to be able to deliver so in a way that makes looking for work less work.
Right, that's exactly right. The retention factor is so critical for, I was thinking about this morning and talking to you, Matt, about it too, is, it's not just about your customers that care about retention. Of course, it's the staffing companies that care about retention because that's how you, guarantee the sale and you get paid ultimately. So if these candidates are having a terrible time through the hiring process, it's very manual, it's very cumbersome, it takes a long time, they don't know their screening results are in, or maybe their screening results are inaccurate, and they get declined for the job when they shouldn't have because they didn't use the accurate provider. They didn't get any, warm and fuzzies through the hiring process. Like, for example, they weren't able to even see on video or in some other way have that one-on-one communication with who they might even work with. Yeah, if they have a bad experience or just not a good experience, this is a really competitive space. I don't need to tell you guys that. You know that a million times better than me. And you've got to win the war for talent. You are fighting for those talented people for your customers. And so you're just as much on the line for it. But in addition to that, you've got to help these companies retain them. And so back to that bad experience, why would anyone want to stick around if they got off on the wrong foot and they had a really bad, what I'd call the honeymoon period? And then all of a sudden they get there the first week and they can't even be productive that week because they don't have a laptop set up or an office completed. That is all stuff that just surmounts to a bad experience and translates to poor retention and the person looking elsewhere. So that is why it's become so important, also because it's become so competitive.
Thank you very much. Matt, that is all we have from our attendees in regards to questions. So I guess it's time to finish up.
Great, thank you. So thank you again, Karen and TalentWise, for helping put on this webinar today. I had a whole lot of fun researching and delivering a white paper on the evolution of staffing technology, which goes into what I talked about in a little bit more detail, but also some of these business and case uses about why these things are so important. I definitely would recommend checking out that white paper. And when we send attendees a copy of our deck, we'll also send a link where you can download that. I'd encourage everyone to read it, and included in that is a guide for what contemporary staffing technology should have. And from an RFP perspective, I've definitely seen a lot of vendors out there and can echo Karen when she says that they're the only ones who really check every best practices box. So again, thank you for joining today, and thank you to TalentWise for all your support.
Thank you all. This has been fun. We need to do it again.
I will look forward to it. And again, I would encourage everyone to check out TalentWise.com. And please remember that a copy of the webinar and slides will be sent to all attendees within 48 hours.
That concludes today's webinar. For more information about our sponsor, TalentWise, please feel free to contact them at any time at 1-877-893-6123, or you can email them at sales@talentwise.com. And of course, you can find everything you want to know about them on their website, talentwise.com. Thank you for joining us today at the Recruiting Blogs webinar, sponsored by TalentWise.